Halloween franchise is a little more special to me than the other slasher series because not only is it the one that really took all the slasher elements, put them together, and created what would become the formula, but it's also the first series that I ever saw. It's not the first classic slasher film I ever saw. I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre a couple years prior, and I had seen some other crappy slasher movies before that. Like I had seen I Know What You Did Last Summer and The Dentist, and I even caught little glimpses of classic slashers, like a little bit of Nightmare on Elm Street here, a little bit of Friday the 13th, a little bit of Child's Play 1 and 2, and I saw all of Child's Play 3, and I even saw Jason X prior to this. I always forget that that's actually technically the first Friday the 13th movie I ever saw in its entirety, and that's terrible. But anyway, I love horror, and I've always been into horror as a theme. I always called it ghoulish stuff as a kid. I always referred to it as the ghoulish theme because not everything ghoulish is horror. Like, I love Beetlejuice and Nightmare Before Christmas, but those are not horror films. I saw a lot of horror comedy stuff from the 80s, like Gremlins and Lost Boys. I loved as a kid. I watched it all the time. Every Halloween I had to watch Lost Boys. And I saw a lot of ghost movies like Poltergeist and Amityville Horror, which scared the crap out of me when I was in second grade. And I was exposed to some of the Stephen King stuff like It, Carrie, The Shining, Pet Sematary. So I did see some horror as a kid, and any of it I did see I really liked. I always liked the theme of like skeletons and werewolves and vampires and ghosts and all that. Like I loved horror as a theme, but I never really saw the slasher films until I got older, and that's when I got really into horror. It wasn't until I was in my 20s that I saw the Universal Monster movies. When I was a kid, I saw Frankenstein and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, but that was it. But it was in late high school that I started getting into actually wanting to see all of the slasher films. And after I got out of high school, when I was in college, one Halloween, it was 2006, I believe, I saw Hellraiser and I saw Halloween 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I believe Resurrection, but I wasn't really watching Resurrection. I saw all of those in one day. I saw Hellraiser the night before, fell asleep, then woke up in a lazy boy chair and just watched all the first 5 Halloween movies. Luckily, I didn't see 6 then. I saw that years later because we'll get to 6. I took in every Halloween movie that day. That's when I learned that Halloween 3 did not have Michael Myers, and it blew my mind because I was expecting Michael Myers and no one ever talked about it back then. Like now it's common knowledge, and I think amongst horror buffs it's always been common knowledge, but back then like no one talked about the fact that there was a Halloween movie that had nothing to do with the rest of the Halloween franchise. So that was really shocking when I saw that. I told everyone I knew about it. I thought it was hilarious. I tried to get everyone I knew into it, and no one believed me or no one cared. I guess they just didn't care. So anyway, Halloween's very important to me because Halloween was kind of the first time I really got invested in a whole series of horror movies. And even though I saw them all together, Halloween 1 still stands out as a special film to me. I actually consider it my second favorite film of all time. It might even be tied with Rocky as my number 1 favorite film of all time, but it loses some major points because they kill a dog in it, and I just hate that shit. Like, just leave the dog alone. Don't kill dogs in movies. It doesn't scare me. It just pisses me off. It just makes me not want to like your movie, so keep that out. I think you could actually edit Halloween 1 where the dog doesn't die, the dog's not even in it, and you would lose nothing from the movie. I've actually thought about doing that because I like the movie so much, but I hate them killing the dog. I've actually debated making my own edit of the movie where the dog doesn't die. But Halloween 1, it's a masterpiece. Like, I hate that aspect, but I love everything else the movie does so much. I try to ignore that and separate it from the movie. Because there have been movies I've just straight up hated before because they kill a dog. Like, I just hate the movie because of that. But Halloween, I really like everything else about it. There's something special about Halloween that no other Halloween movie, possibly no other slasher movie post-Halloween, has really ever accomplished. There's this sort of magic to how the movie's made. It looks very primitive by today's standards. It's a very low-budget movie. It has that 70s graininess to it. There's just something about 70s movies. I don't know. There was like a realness to them. They felt real. They felt like they were actually happening in the real world. No other decade really gets it. Early 80s had it a little bit. Late 60s had it a bit. And I'm not saying 70s movies are the best movies ever. Some of my top favorite movies happen to be 70s movies, my top 2. But I don't think it's necessarily the best decade for movies. But I feel like there was just this rawness to filmmaking then, where it just felt really real. It wasn't as like overacted and almost like a stage show like movies prior to it was. Movies before that were very theater. And it's not as like crazy, over-the-top, synthetic kind of in-your-face action and special effects and insane camera work and lighting and stuff like movies after it. I feel like the 70s was this weird moment in the middle where film just felt like you were watching real things actually happening. There's so many movies in the 70s, especially horror films, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Alice Sweet Alice, Black Christmas, and Halloween, where they just kind of feel real. There's something raw to them that just makes it feel more believable and makes it more exciting. It's like you're on this, while it's gruesome and grotesque, all four of those movies, you're on this exciting trip with these characters. There's just this whole mystique about how the movie was made. I don't think there's any movie ever where I'm more into how the movie was made than Halloween. I can watch documentaries about the making of Halloween endlessly. Pretty much every year around the holiday Halloween, I watch documentaries on this movie. Whether it be the same ones I'm rewatching or different ones, I just always love hearing more about the making of this movie. There's little things like when you see the cameraman hiding behind the bushes and everything that, yeah, they are flaws, but somehow it just adds this charm to it. It's just hard to describe, but somehow the making of this movie was just very charming. The fact that 6 different actors played Michael Myers, even Deborah Hill, like people who were actually the ones making the film would play the character at certain times. While I'm not a filmmaker by any means, I don't claim to be, everyone has that one movie that kind of gets them interested in filmmaking, and this is the one for me. I feel like this one's just very interesting. But that aside, it's also just a fantastic movie. I just think Halloween is one of the #1 movies that just puts you in the Halloween season mood. And Halloween season is my favorite time of year. I love Halloween. It just keeps kind of getting better and better as I get older because it's all the stuff I loved about Halloween as a kid, mixed with all the new things I love about Halloween, mixed with all the horror movies I've seen, mixed with, the spooky music and decorations and the seasonal harvest food and everything. Halloween is just a great season. I love it. And this just really brings you back to being a kid on Halloween, as weird as that sounds, because it's about a serial killer murdering a bunch of teenagers. But the atmosphere is just so perfect. The leaves blowing across the street at night, even just the way it looks, how dark it is outside and the houses are lit up and everything, it feels like Halloween night as a kid. This movie really spoke to me in a way of just really brought out what I love about Halloween. There's very few other movies that do that, and the other ones that do really aren't horror movies. Like Hocus Pocus really feels like a Halloween movie. That one really brings me into the Halloween mood. Nightmare Before Christmas really does. And as I mentioned before, Lost Boys, simply just because that was a Halloween tradition as a kid. We always watched The Lost Boys, even though it's really not a Halloween movie. So just hearing the music and everything from that movie just makes me feel like it's Halloween time. But Halloween is really the only one that's an all-out horror movie. It's not horror comedy, it's not a musical, kids movie or anything. Like, it's an all-out horror movie. Halloween is also just amazing because it kind of doesn't tell you anything. We get a lot of exposition, but we kind of get no explanation. Dr. Loomis, played by Donald Pleasance, who's one of the greatest characters ever in a horror franchise. He's constantly giving us all these lines about pure evil and about the devil's eyes and all this stuff. And he's always making Michael Myers out to be like he's this supernatural force, like he's Dracula or something. But what we see is he's just a regular kid. And we don't get any reason why he wants to kill the people he kills. He just loves killing people. He experienced it at a young age, realized he loved it, and now just wants to kill people on Halloween. It's like a fun game for him. And that's one of the things that's so great about the movie. We don't know who Michael Myers is. We don't even know what Michael Myers is. There's just some great shots in the movie. Like when Michael's standing by the clotheslines, just staring up at Laurie Strode in her house. And when she looks at the window again, he's just gone. There's just something really eerie about how she just keeps seeing him standing there. Weirdly, especially in the shots in broad daylight, there's just something really creepy about him just being out there in the open, and no one else notices him, no one else sees him. He sticks out like a sore thumb, but somehow he blends in and stays hidden. It's really creepy and disturbing, honestly, when you see him out in broad daylight. And that brings us to Laurie Strode. This movie wouldn't be as good as it is if it wasn't for a good cast of characters. And Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis in her breakout role, the one that dubbed her the Scream Queen, which she earned. I mean, hell, when she screams in this movie, she screams. Like, she has some of the best screams I've ever heard in a movie. But Laurie Strode is a fantastic character. She's not made to be the ultimate innocent character. Like, sure, she doesn't have sex while her friends do. But people often say that she's like the goody two-shoes ones who follows like good Christian morals, and that's why she's spared, that's why she lives. But we have a scene earlier on where she's smoking pot with her friend. We already established that she jokes about sex with her friends and everything, and she's interested in a guy and she wants to hook up with him. She's just a little shy. She's not as outgoing as her friend Annie, so it's a little harder for her, but she's not like this pure saint like people make her out to be. She's a normal human teenage girl, and that's one of the things that makes her so believable and so likable. It can't be denied that yes, she does take on the motherly responsibility of protecting the kids, while the other teenagers are just off drinking and screwing and partying, and they're the ones who die. And John Carpenter has denied any intention of that. He says that there was no message there. He wasn't actually intentionally trying to say that about kids, that if you do bad things will happen to you. And you can debate whether he's telling the truth or not, but to be honest, I kind of believe him. I think he was just portraying teenagers how you portray them, and honestly the ones who are wound up and having fun and partying on Halloween night are probably going to be less aware of a danger than one who's bored sitting around already having to watch kids on Halloween night. Even through the two little kids, we get a cool little glimpse of the fun of Halloween when you're a child. You get back from trick-or-treating and you just watch scary movies and eat candy and carve pumpkins. The movie just does a great job. But anyway, back to the characters. Laurie Strode is amazing. She acts scared and she screams and cries a lot in the movie and trembles in fear, but she fights back too. And she actually fights back pretty hard. She kind of invented the last girl trope, which is something they say in slasher films, where there's always the female character who survives to the end and fights off the villain. But it had been done already in other movies. I mean, you have Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Black Christmas already did this. But Laurie Strode kicks a lot more ass than those characters did. Laurie Strode actively kills Michael Myers or severely damages him multiple times. It's just Michael Myers is an unstoppable force, and she wasn't counting on that. So, like, if that was a real guy, that was the normal guy, she would have killed Michael very shortly after he broke into her house. She stabs him. Her friends, a lot of people don't seem to like, but honestly, I actually do like them. They seem like really fun, believable teenage girls. They seem like if I was a teenager, I'd want to hang out with these kids. Annie is a lot of fun. I know some people don't like Annie, but I find Annie to be a really fun character. I love the whole totally thing. She's just always saying totally. And sorry, I don't remember the name of the other girl, but the one who's the daughter of the policeman. She's likable too. She's not as interesting as Annie, and she's not as relatable as Laurie, but she's still cool. They're all good characters, and they all come off like they're really good friends. You believe that these are real friends. They don't feel like stock, personality-less, crappy slasher characters who are just there to get turned into mincemeat. Like, as much as I do love the Friday the 13th series, I do have to say, like, the characters in those movies suck. They're just there so we can see Jason chop them to pieces in clever, crazy ways, and the audience is basically supposed to root on the killer. In Halloween, we really don't. We actually do want to see Laurie survive. Other characters worth talking about are, obviously, I already mentioned Donald Pleasance playing Sam Loomis, who is a consistent character. He's one of the only ones who's in almost every single movie in the franchise. And he just brings a great quality to the movies. He's like the seasoned monster hunter of the movies, the Van Helsing, if you will. And he's just very essential to have him there, I think. He adds a lot to the movie. He was added for star power, but I really appreciate the character as a whole. And he's a great way of linking the movies together. I feel like if the sequels didn't have Dr. Loomis, it would feel a lot less like Halloween. And of course, the biggest character to talk about is Michael Myers. I've already touched on him about what he is and who he is and how we don't know any of that. But it just has to be said that so many moments with Michael Myers in this movie are just iconic. I mean, when he stabs the guy through the wall and just does the head tilt, every single piece of media today that wants to portray a character as being insane copies the Michael Myers head tilt. Every horror franchise does that today, whether it be a horror movie or a horror video game, or even if it's just like they're trying to make a character look crazy in an anime or something. They always do the head tilt. They always rip it off to the point where I hate it now. I hate seeing the head tilt. It's so overdone. It just seems like the easy, uncreative, safe way to make your character look crazy. But Michael Myers did it with class. Michael Myers is looking at his kill, this crazy piece of art he made by stabbing this teenage boy through a wall. And he's kind of just tilting his head back and forth like he's thinking about it. He's admiring it, like his handiwork. Whereas now they just, tilt the head to one side slowly in a horror movie, or in an anime, they just tilt the head to the side and bulge their eyes and smile and laugh. And it's just like, I get it, you're crazy. Oh no, these guys are crazy. But I don't think anyone even realizes at this point that the cliche that they're ripping off is from Halloween. It's like they ripped off the cliche of the cliche of the cliche. It's just being done to death now, and no one even knows why they started doing it. There's also the iconic scene where we think Michael's dead in the background, and Laurie Strode's crying, and we slowly see him sit up in the background. It's very reminiscent of Count Dracula or Orlok from Nosferatu getting out of the coffin. It was just a very effective scare. He's kind of out of focus, kind of foggy and blurry in the background, but it's just enough to let us know, like, oh crap, he's still alive. We know what she's about to find out. There's also a great moment where there's just shadow behind Laurie, and Michael Myers just sort of fades through the shadow. Like, he just kind of fades into the image, almost like a photo is being developed and we're starting to see it actually pop out. It's just some great simple effects that are ultra effective. That final chase scene is, I think, still the greatest slasher movie chase scene ever. And I think the scene where Laurie's in the closet and he's breaking through the walls and the light is kind of on by mistake and we just see him coming in after us in the POV shot, I think that's one of the scariest, most disturbing shots in the movie. I think that's the one moment where Michael Myers looks his scariest. And another great thing in this movie is just the sound of him breathing in the mask. That's done really well in this movie. I don't feel like it's ever been as effective in the movies that follow, the sequels. So I think this movie just really nailed Michael Myers. Like, when we hear that breathing in the mask, it sounds like a creepy homicidal maniac who's just breathing heavy, thinking about how he's gonna murder everybody. Like, it's so disturbing. It's like, it's just enough of a human side applied to this faceless monster. I think that's one of the things that works about Michael Myers, is we can't figure out what he is. They keep giving us a little bit of his human side, then they keep giving us a little bit of this look of he's an unstoppable evil spirit. And the fact that we don't know what he is just makes it creepier. It's like fear of the unknown. We don't know what he is. This is also the best The Mask has ever looked. I feel like in the sequels, they always try to one-up The Mask. In many later films, especially the Rob Zombie ones, they tried really hard to make it look extra dirty and extra dark and beat up, and they're trying way too hard. This was the perfect balance of, like, it just looks like an old mask. It doesn't look too clean and it doesn't look too dirty. It just looks perfect and creepy and effective. The hair is all over the place. It just looks disturbing. Also, you can't ignore the fact that John Carpenter made an amazing score for this film. John Carpenter's music is some of the best movie scores I've ever heard. I love John Carpenter's scores. Big Trouble in Little China, Halloween 3, Escape from New York, they all have fantastic music. His mix of like piano and synth works so well with his style of filmmaking. Halloween's just great on atmosphere, great on mood. I know a lot of people will find the opening of the film very slow. It kind of gradually builds up to that big chase scene at the end. But I love it. I think it's just great at suspense. It's great at just making you feel like we know these kids, these are real kids, and this is actually happening to them. Halloween is a masterpiece. I will always love this movie, and it will probably always be my second favorite film of all time, unless some film happens to pop in my life that just changes my life forever. Halloween 2 seems to very frequently be regarded as one of the best sequels, if not the best sequel to Halloween. And while it's serviceable, yes, it's, a masked killer stalking Laurie Strode and her friends and killing a bunch of them, I just feel like it has no reason to exist. It's honestly one of my least favorite of the Halloween sequels. The first movie was so good at creating that Halloween feel. You know, there was jack-o'-lanterns on the front porches and leaves blowing around and traces of mischief night from the night before and just trick-or-treaters going around. The ambiance was perfect. Like, it was Halloween. It makes you feel like it's Halloween. Part 2 just takes place in a hospital, and there's just nothing Halloweenish about a hospital. I'm sorry. I know they throw some Halloween decorations around here and there, but I think it would have been fine for like one scene to take place in a hospital. Like maybe it starts in the hospital, but it's got to get into Haddonfield. It's got to get into the town. That's what makes it feel like Halloween to me. You know, you had the Myers house, you had the old spooky house, you had the regular neighborhood where Laurie Strode and her friends lived, and you had all these different locations, the mental hospital. This one, you just have a regular hospital. And it's just Michael Myers going around killing people in really brutal ways because they're trying to one-up Friday the 13th, which came around, and I mean, its sole purpose was to try to one-up Halloween. So they're kind of trying to outdo the copycat. So they just come up with these really gruesome ways for him to kill them. Suddenly it's much more graphic. The first movie, you really don't see any gore. You don't see large amounts of blood or anything in that film. It's really mostly left to the imagination. Even when people are being stabbed, you don't see blood squirting everywhere. It's a very mild movie as far as violence goes. It's all implied, as was the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I think that makes them much more effective, creepy movies, because whatever crazy special effects they can make with intestines coming out and all this stuff, it's never going to be as scary as what you picture. I don't find gore scary. I find atmosphere and mood creepy. Gore is just kind of excess. And Halloween 2, I don't really find to be a creepy movie. It just seems like excess. It just seems like a bunch of gore. Michael Myers doesn't seem creepy anymore. He just seems like some angry guy going around killing teenagers in humorous ways. It takes the seriousness out of the franchise. And again, it just has none of that Halloween feeling. It feels like any generic slasher film. Like by this point, after Halloween blew up, everyone was ripping it off. You had so many slasher movies. There were even ones with Jamie Lee Curtis, like Terror Train, where it was always a masked killer killing people, Madman. I don't even know if that came out before this, I don't think it did, but still, there was just so many in the 80s, just masked killers or deformed killers or immortal people just killing everybody. This just blended in. The one that started it and stood out and was the reason for the trend has just become the trend. And it's one of the reasons I really don't like Halloween 2. It just doesn't stand out to me. It's one of the most forgettable Halloween movies ever. Like, I just see no reason for it to really exist except for cashing in on the name. And they were supposed to have killed off Michael Myers at the end of the film. Dr. Loomis sacrifices himself in a fire where he and Michael died together. They burned to death. Which to me doesn't make any sense. I get it, he burned, but at the same time, it's like he got shot like 9 times. He got his eyes stabbed. He fell out of a freaking window. Like, a lot of stuff happened to him in the first movie, and he's just totally fine. Even when they take the mask off in the first film, you don't even see any damage on his eyes. He's totally fine. So, as far as I'm concerned, Michael Myers is immortal. Setting him on fire, that might like slow him down for an hour. Maybe he might lie there for a bit, but he recharges. Like, he gets stabbed with a knife, and then like a minute later gets up and starts fighting again like nothing happened. So, I don't know. I don't think that it really was a definitive ending. It's kind of silly that they always try to make that definitive ending in these movies. Like, they always try to explain how Jason Voorhees is going to be killed for good this time, and how Michael Myers is going to be killed for good. But it's never anything as definitive as anything they've done before. They don't, like, chop them into little pieces or anything. They don't blow them up. They just kill them. And sometimes they'll add that they blow them up, and that never works either. So it's like, it just kind of seems silly. Don't even bother. Just have him like locked in a cell or something. Lock him in like an airtight box or something, like a safe. That's the only way you could get rid of him. I think that's much creepier. That's a much more effective ending. The first movie ended great because they didn't kill him off. He was still out there, and that's how the movie ended. I've even heard that they told Donald Pleasance that he had 2 ways to act that. He can act shocked that Michael Myers isn't there when he looks out the window, or he can put on a face that's like, I knew this was going to happen. And he clearly went with the latter. He did the whole, I knew this was going to happen. And then Jamie Lee Curtis's reaction to it, where she starts slowly crying again. You can just see how tired and worn out and scared she is. It's so effective. I think that's such a better chilling ending for a Halloween film than just like, oh, he's dead now. Because we know he's not dead. Just ending on it where you see shots of the neighborhood and you hear him breathing and you know he's out there, that's so much better. And I think, honestly, locking him in a cell, if he's in this, like, specially made, impossible, impenetrable cell to break out of, that would be such a creepier way to end it, is them looking in on the cell, the most dangerous thing in the world, locked in there, and they're just praying to God he never gets out. That's so much scarier and so much more effective than, oh, we're just gonna set him on fire or blow him up, boom, 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 big special effects. Aren't we impressed? But they never really did that. They did have one more movie where he gets out at the end, but we'll talk about that later. This was supposed to be the definitive end, but like I said, I wasn't buying it. And yeah, it just kind of ends on a low note. A very unmemorable movie to me, and I just never have much to say about it. I feel like it's such an underwhelming response to Halloween. Halloween 3 Season of the Witch blew my mind the first time I saw it. I was seeing it again in a marathon of all the Halloween films, and they all start the same, where it shows a pumpkin and it plays, well, usually the Halloween theme. Halloween 3, it plays a different theme. And we see a pumpkin being formed on like a CRTV. And I was expecting it to just go into another Michael Myers movie. And immediately I'm like, oh, that's weird. Jamie Lee Curtis is gone. I guess this is where she dropped out of the series. And I remember that H2O had come out. Like, I remember being aware of it when it came out. Everyone was making a big deal. And I think that might even be when I learned what Halloween was. So I knew that she had returned after a long time of not being in it. So I'm like, oh, this must be where she dropped out. And there's all this stuff about Halloween masks, and I found that weird. I'm like, wow, this is weird. I wonder where this is going. And then they introduced this new character, played by Tom Atkins, who was awesome in horror movies in the 80s, like Night of the Creeps. And I'm just following this, and more I'm starting to think, like, does this have nothing to do with Michael Myers? How are they going to bring Michael Myers into this? They're already setting up quite a story here. And it's not until at some point he goes into a bar and they're showing the original Halloween on TV that I'm like, oh, wait a sec. This has nothing to do with the other Halloween movies. And that just shocked the hell out of me because I was not expecting that. No one I knew had ever told me that that's what this movie was like. And after, for years, when I would tell people about Halloween 3, they were always surprised when I told them that it had no connection to Michael Myers. I think it's funny too that they acknowledge that Halloween is a movie in this movie. So this ridiculous thing is the real world, and Halloween, the masterpiece, is just a fake movie. That one doesn't count, but this one counts. So Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, which is a name that was already a title for a horror movie, not a very good one. Season of the Witch was a movie from the 70s, which is kind of a mixed movie. It's not very good. I think it's kind of awful. It has some weird messages in it. But I will say there's a dream sequence at some point in that movie that is actually one of the best and creepiest, most disturbing masked stalker slasher scenes I've ever seen. It's like a chase scene through the main character's house with this masked killer, and it's really disturbing and really well shot. But anyway, we're talking about Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, which is completely unrelated. It's honestly hard to say this is a movie that's so bad it's good, because the story is stupid as hell. It makes no sense. It's so idiotic, so crazy, so off the wall, and you really have to just put your brain on sleep mode when you watch this movie, because your common sense and logic are constantly going to be like, how the hell would that work? Or who came up with this? Why would this happen? And it's just a crazy, weird movie. It's just a fun, goofy movie. It's almost like an adult version of something you would read in a kid's book. It's like a scary stories to tell in the dark story about Halloween, but turned into a movie. Most people probably already know the premise because it's become pretty popular these days. It's kind of become a cult hit now. But for anyone who doesn't know, just let you know how weird it is. It's about a Halloween mask company. Well, they're actually a toy company, but they produce these Halloween masks. They're called Silver Shamrock, and they are stationed in a town that they own. And the town has this really early curfew and these really weird rules, and everyone's very strange in the town. And they make these masks, and they're cool masks, but they're not the kind of ones that would like take over the world. Like, it's just a jack-o'-lantern, a witch, and a skull. but every kid in the world is like obsessed with them and wants them. It's like, I don't really think these masks would take off like that. I mean, the catchy commercial might work, but yeah, so there's this mask company who's making these masks called Silver Shamrock. They all have these little like metal medallions sewn onto them with the logo. They were constantly running these commercials that plays this London Bridge cover that's like 8 more days till Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. And it's like a countdown to Halloween, and kids are supposed to be really into it, and something special is going to happen on midnight if they wear their masks when they watch the countdown. And that's kind of happening in the background. What we're seeing is guys in suits going around murdering people. One of them covers himself in gasoline and blows himself up in a car. Our main character, played by Tom Atkins, is kind of just randomly investigating all of it. The daughter of one of the guys who died becomes his love interest and sidekick, and they suddenly travel to the Silver Shamrock town to find out what's going on and investigate this, because everyone who dies is like holding a Silver Shamrock mask. And there's actually a character I really like in the movie who's kind of like the money penny of the film. Like, she works with the main character and they have like a little flirtation going on between each other, but she's actually kind of like fun and likable and funny, but they kill her off and I was kind of sad to see her go. I think she and the main character have way more chemistry than he and the actual love interest do. And eventually we learn that these guys in suits are robots who are, I guess, made out of people. I guess they used to be people and now they're robots. I don't really know. And they're going around and killing anyone who might leak the secret of the conspiracy that's going on with Silver Shamrock. And that conspiracy is that Silver Shamrock is run by people who study witchcraft. They're warlocks. And they want to bring Halloween back to its sacrificial roots of the Festival of Samhain. And they want the towns to run red with blood, and they want all the kids to die. So somehow those medallions and the masks that I mentioned before, when they watch the countdown on Halloween, they don't just like set on fire or explode or anything. No, they somehow like transform the kid's head into a bunch of bugs and snakes. It makes no sense. Like, how are there living creatures inside the medallion? I don't know if it's supposed to be like they eat their way out and they eat their way through the kid's head, but I don't think so. I don't think they're actually supposed to be stored in there. Like, I don't think he squeezed a bunch of snakes into a tiny little coin, because that wouldn't make any freaking sense. So I guess it's witchcraft, but it's witchcraft that's like triggered by a signal on a television. It's such an elaborate plot that just makes no sense. Like, why not just release poison gas all over town on Halloween? Just drive around a vehicle releasing poison gas. Like, why not? It seems so elaborate for something that would be so much easier to do. And it makes no sense. Like, it just rots your head into a bunch of living creatures. How do they come alive? Like, you're giving birth to these snakes and bugs. Like, it's so weird. So technically you're trying to kill a bunch of things as sacrifices, but for every kid you kill, you're making like 50 new lives. Like 50 crickets are born. So you're actually creating life, which is kind of the opposite of what you're trying to do. So it makes no sense. But anyway, Tom Atkins breaks into the headquarters and they capture him and they try to kill him, but he breaks out and a whole bunch of nonsense happens. He ultimately ends up stopping it. Somehow Stonehenge is involved and it's just really weird. And when he puts an end to it, Cochran, the main villain, he's bested and, you know, him and all his robot men die. At that point, Tom Atkins is leaving so he can go stop the broadcast before it happens and kills all the kids in his town. And as he's leaving, he recovers his love interest, and she turns out to be a robot. And I've never quite understood if she was turned into a robot while she was captive. That's what I always assumed happened, that they turned her into a robot. Or if she was actually a robot the whole time and she was like a spy sent to him. Because, I mean, they had sex earlier. Like, how did he not notice she was a robot? She must have weighed a lot if she was a robot. So I don't really know. It's just really bizarre. Also, there's a point earlier on where some woman is like poking around at one of the medallions and it electrocutes her. It's like, how come she didn't get turned into a bunch of crickets and snakes? It's bizarre as hell. It's super hammy and campy, but the special effects are really good. The music is outstanding, and honestly, the acting is pretty darn good by some of the cast members for what it is. The first time I saw it, I couldn't believe how bad it was. I thought it was hilarious. I'm like, everyone needs to see this movie. But now that I've seen it so many times, I genuinely just like it because honestly, it puts you in the Halloween spirit so much more than Halloween 2 did. It's not quite as strong as Halloween 1. It's nowhere near as good a film as Halloween 1. But it definitely puts you in that Halloween mood. And honestly, I'm kind of disappointed they didn't keep doing this. Because there are so many different interesting, cool Halloween stories you can tell. If it was an anthology series, I would have been really cool with just seeing different Halloween stories in each one. And Michael Myers never comes back. Or imagine how cool it would have been if we had like 4 or 5 Halloween movies, and then suddenly the 5th or 6th one is the return of Michael Myers, and we get like a second Michael Myers story. That would be so cool. That would be like, they're kind of episodes, and every now and then you get one that is a sequel to one of the previous ones. That would have been way more interesting than just getting Michael Myers over and over and over again doing the same thing. I know they wanted this to be the direction for the series. They wanted to turn into an anthology series, and they were disappointed that people just wanted Michael Myers. But I think the reason they screwed up is because they did Halloween 2. I mean, I really wish Halloween 2 was just Halloween 3. That would actually be much better. By doing Halloween 2, you just got everyone's expectations up. You can't blame the fans for expecting more Michael Myers, because that's what you've been giving them so far. So I do feel like they really shot themselves in the foot there, and it would have been much better if Halloween 3 was just Halloween 2. We could have had this great anthology series of all these different crazy types of horror stories happening on Halloween, and we could have got fun little references to the other Halloween movies within each film. But I'd still say Halloween 3 is honestly one of my favorites. Halloween 4 is, I guess it's technically not a good movie, and it starts a really stupid direction for the series that by the time we get to Halloween 6, it makes this whole trilogy of 4, 5, and 6 seem really bad. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't love Halloween 4. There's things about it I don't like, and it's nowhere near as good as the first movie, but honestly, Halloween 4 is my favorite sequel. I just have a lot of fun watching this one. I feel like it's the next best made film, and again, it just captures the Halloween feeling really well. The main thing I don't like is how they just killed Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis's character, off screen. Like, they don't even elaborate on it. They're just like, oh, she's dead. She just died. And that just seems like a really weak fate for a character that we loved and connected with so much. I understand that she didn't want to come back and play Laurie Strode again, probably, so that's why they ended up having to do that. But it's definitely cheap. They could have just written her out some other way. Like, oh, she just wanted to get as far away from Haddonfield as possible. Or maybe she's even in a loony bin or something. I don't know. Anything would have been better than just killing her off. But the new star is Jamie Lloyd, played by Danielle Harris. She's meant to be Laurie Strode's daughter, but now since they killed Laurie Strode off, Jamie's living with a foster mother. Danielle Harris is adorable and lovable in this movie. We connect to her quite a lot just because, again, Halloween just creates a great feeling of what being a kid on Halloween was like, and in this movie, we actually experience it through a kid. There are certain things that don't make any sense in the movie, like she has this weird mental link with Michael Myers where she's dreaming about him before she ever even met him, and they don't really elaborate on that much. Somehow she's just having nightmares about a guy she's never met. But she's a very lovable character. She's very relatable. We really want to see her live. We don't want to see anything bad happen to Jamie. The other human characters are likable, but none of them really stand out as much as Jamie. Well, except for Donald Pleasance playing Dr. Loomis again, and he's fantastic as always. They completely ignore that he burned to death at the end of Halloween 2. Now he has like a scratch on his face or something, and that's supposed to be like, oh, okay, I guess he survived. I can't really describe why I like this movie so much. I just find this one really fun. It's really fun to watch. It's very competently made, and again, it really reminds me of Halloween. It does seem to be definitely the most popular of what fans called the Thorn trilogy, which was 4, 5, and 6. I would like to call it the Jamie trilogy, but thanks to the 6th movie, we kind of can't do that, because I feel like she's the real link that brings these 3 films together, and the Thorn was just some crap they made up in the 5th movie with no idea what they were going to do, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't have a terrible amount of stuff to say. I just find it to be a really fun movie, and just the closest the series ever got to recapturing the magic of the first film. The biggest shocker in Halloween 4, spoilers, is the ending, where Jamie, after being traumatized by everything she went to and all the murder and mayhem she witnessed that night, is now kind of becoming the next Michael Myers, and she stabs her stepmother to death and just stands there in a clown costume, staring blankly forward, the same way Michael did at the beginning of Halloween 1. If this was the end of the series, this would have been a beautiful, poetic way to bring it all together again. Go full circle. But honestly, I wanted to see a sequel because I would be interested in how they would go about this. A lot of people have said that it would have been dumb to have a little kid as the killer, or that would have been like morally wrong at the time. But I mean, we've already had movies about killer kids at this time, and it was always very creepy and effective when done right. I feel like it would have been really cool to see Jamie become the next killer. Or maybe just have the series revolve around her fighting her tendencies to want to kill. Like, the more she comes in contact with Michael Myers, the more she wants to become him, but at the same time, she wants to live a normal life and fight that. And I think they tried that kind of, but not really. They really never pay off with this ending. Halloween 5 is considered by many to be the first really bad Halloween movie. And it's definitely the worst one at that point, but if I'm gonna be honest, I like watching it more than Halloween 2. I think it's more fun. I saw the first 5 films all together in a row in one night the first time I ever saw them. So I kind of saw them all equally. I didn't go in with any nostalgia for another entry or any bias towards another entry. I didn't build up time to love the other ones more than any of the other films. So I kind of went in with a blank mind. So maybe that's why I appreciate Halloween 5 a little more. I see it as kind of more of the same good stuff. But that's not to say it's good. Halloween 5 is still definitely one of the weaker Halloween films. And it has some big problems, like the goofy cops with the cartoon sound effects.
All clear.
It's just so out of place. It's so tonally jarring. It's the second Halloween movie to kill a dog. Stop killing the fucking dog, you assholes. I don't get it. Even outside of horror movies, if you ever see a dog, or really an animal at all, show up in a movie, it's almost guaranteed to die. I don't get why they have to do that. Another reason why The Lost Boys is awesome. The Nook kicks ass. But yeah, they introduced the stupidest thing in Halloween 5 is the Thorn Cult. We get little glimpses of what will eventually be revealed to be a cult that controls Michael Myers. We get our first look at what the 6th movie is going to be about, even though apparently there was actually no plans for what it actually was while making Halloween 5. They were throwing in sequel bait with no plan of a sequel. They had no idea what this weird thorn tattoo on everyone was going to amount to. There's just some guy who looks like Judge Doom going around being an asshole, and we see him throughout the movie, and then he blows Michael Myers out of jail with like a bazooka or an RPG or something, and that's supposed to be the sequel bait. And no, it doesn't pay off. So they ignore like everything from Halloween 4 that was supposed to matter. There are no consequences for Jamie stabbing her stepmother. It's barely even referenced. Jamie's now a mute, which is kind of weird. Like, she can't speak, but eventually she gets out of that. It's really a mess. They didn't know what they were doing with this movie. They kill off Rachel, who was the surviving sort of parental bodyguard character of the last movie, very early in this film. And I think the aspect that most people hate most about Halloween 5 is one that honestly I don't mind, is the character Tina. Most people seem to really, really hate Tina. They talk about how obnoxious and annoying she is. Honestly, I think this character is so fun and lovable. She just seems like she's having a great time. We really feel this sort of like best friend, sisterly bond between Tina and Jamie. They seem like really fun friends. Like, when Tina comes in, you genuinely feel Jamie light up. Like, it's almost like that cool aunt or uncle you had as a kid. We're like, yeah, you're close with your parents, but when that cool aunt or uncle babysits you, you know you're gonna have a fun night. You're gonna eat junk food and watch scary movies and stuff. That's what Tina felt like. She's like the cool, fun, hip babysitter. And you can just tell she's having a great time. And that's honestly one of the reasons why I think I love this movie. Everyone making this film had a fantastic time. They were basically partying in a hotel every night the whole time they were making this movie. Making this movie was a party. And while the movie itself isn't that good, I feel like that fun and that excitement that they had translates through the film and gets into the viewer. You're feeling the fun that they're having. You can tell there was a genuinely good experience going on behind the camera. And if you watch documentaries on the making of Halloween 4 and 5, they show how Danielle Harris and the actress for Tina were honestly really close friends, and they would hang out and party. And while all the older kids were partying, they'd have Danielle Harris come in and play with them, and she'd put on the Michael Myers mask and pretend to stab everybody. And like, it's honestly, the behind the scenes is really fun to see. Like, this movie was just a party. It's like you're watching a Halloween party. And I think that really translates into Tina's character. I actually have a lot of respect for Tina's character. I never disliked her. Even the first time I saw the movie, I liked Tina, and I was disappointed that they killed her off. She's like one of the only protective kind of parental characters who doesn't make it through the movie. And honestly, when she does die, she goes out with a boom. She goes out actually defending Jamie. She's fighting for her. So, I don't know. I don't get what the hate for Tina is. I don't get where it comes from, but people really, really hate this character. I don't know why. She's just a fun-loving character. She's a little irresponsible. Yeah, she's, she like messes around with her boyfriend sometimes where she probably should be watching Jamie, but she's a teenager. Like, she's just a teenager being a teenager. And for a teenager, she's actually a pretty responsible and fun and loving one. So I don't really see why people hate her. The movie definitely does rely on a lot of cheap stuff. Like, the copycats. There's so many pranks. There's so many people wearing Michael Myers masks to scare people. It kind of takes away from the actual presence of Michael Myers. But it does have a really crazy climax, and I just do find the character Tina and her relationship with Jamie very fun. Jamie's still great. Danielle Harris was just a fantastic child actor. Like, usually child actors aren't good. Danielle Harris was amazing. And Donald Pleasance is still being Donald Pleasance. He's still amazing. Halloween 5, it's no masterpiece. It's not that great, but I don't hate it. I don't hate it as much as other people do. I hate what it led to, though. So Halloween 6 came out in the 90s. It had such a troubled development. We have two completely different versions of the movie, one called the producer's cut and one called the theatrical cut. Spoiler alert, both are shit. This is probably my least favorite Halloween movie. I hate this fucking movie. It's so bad. It just ruins everything. It ruins Michael Myers. It ruins Jamie Lloyd. It ruins everything they were building up in the franchise up to this point. And it really just drives it home that it shouldn't have existed. Hell, it even tries to ruin Dr. Loomis. Even though Danielle Harris was a few months away from being 18 and ready to reprise her role in this film, the perfect age, they didn't hire her. They didn't take Danielle Harris, and it broke her heart, and that's really crappy. That's already like, okay, you're off to a bad start. But on top of that, they took this character that we're supposed to care about, and they just kill her off like she's nothing. Like, they don't even care. They also have like weird cult rape stuff with her, which is really disgusting. It's like, what a way to just destroy the legacy of a great character. Jamie Lloyd was the best thing to happen to Halloween since the three main characters of the first film: Laurie Strode, Dr. Loomis, and Michael Myers. Even when she was finally 18 and the movie was still in production, she came to them and said, okay, I'm 18 now, because they told her, like, oh, when you're 18, maybe. She came back, she was 18, and they were like, oh no, we already recast you as somebody else. That's really disrespectful. So yeah, they're disrespectful to the actress, they're disrespectful to the character. I'm not even gonna go too much into the plot, because the plot is just so awful. They bring back Tommy Doyle, which was the little neighbor boy from the first movie that Jamie Lee Curtis was babysitting. Now he's older and he's Ant-Man, he's kind of a peeping Tom creep, and he's not really that likable. He's like a plank of wood. He's such an unappealing main character. Like, again, people hate Tina from the fifth movie, but like, she had so much more charisma and charm than Paul Rudd's horrible performance in this movie. Nothing against Paul Rudd, he's a good actor, but like, come on, he's awful in this film. He's not a main character we care about at all. The movie doesn't even really know who it wants to focus on. It kind of wants to focus on Jamie for a bit. It kind of wants to focus on Tommy Doyle. It kind of wants to focus on this new kid. It kind of wants to focus on the cult. It kind of wants to focus on Dr. Loomis. It's just all over the place. I can't even really say who the main character is. I know it's supposed to be Tommy, but he doesn't feel like the main character. The movie just really didn't need to exist. It brings nothing to the actual series. All it does is hurt the mythology, hurt the characters, hurt the reputation of the franchise, and just crap all over its grave. So what we find out is the thorn symbol that everyone had tattooed onto them, all the bad guys, like Dick Tracy villain, Mumbles, or whoever the hell that was in the last movie, and Michael Myers had the thorn tattoo on them. That means they're part of the Thorn cult, and there's some, what the hell was it, like astrological sign that it's based on, and it's so bad. And Michael Myers is just like this machine pretty much that the cult uses. He's not actually a machine, but he's just like a zombie basically. He's this mindless drone that they just use to sacrifice people for Halloween. And he has to sacrifice everyone in his family. So the cult wants Michael Myers to kill all of his family members, but then they're making new family members and he has to kill them too. And it's just like, why are you creating more family members when your point is to kill all the family members? You're just making your job harder. Or maybe there have to be Myers to kill every year. Only Myers, only that family works as a worthy sacrifice for the gods of Halloween. I don't know. So a lot of fans will say that the theatrical cut is the worst of the two because Tommy Doyle just beats Michael Myers with a pipe and somehow that kills him. And it really doesn't sum anything up, but it just goes for more like action and more violence and stuff. But the producer's cut, I think, is so much worse because it does even more damage to the mythology than the regular one does. There's like rocks you can put on the ground in a certain formation that just stop Michael Myers and he can't move. He just stands there like an idiot. Like that's even stupider than the Jason killing knife from Jason Goes to Hell. I couldn't get over how dumb that was. Then I saw this movie and I'm like, okay, never mind. A knife existing just so that you can kill this one guy in the world isn't anywhere near as dumb as these stones. Like, it's just ridiculous. He just shuts down. Like, he just goes into, like, safe mode or something. The weird twist that Dr. Loomis has to be the new caretaker of Michael Myers is just so weird. It doesn't make any sense, and it's so dumb to even assume that you're gonna have Donald Pleasance for a Halloween 7 and make him a major part of it when he was so old at that point. I mean, he died before the movie even went to theaters. It's just so bad. I hate Halloween 6. I hate what it does to the Halloween mythology. I hate how it ruins Michael Myers. Much like how I feel movies like Jason Goes to Hell ruined the mythology of Friday the 13th. I feel like Halloween 6 does that times 10. It really ruins all the mystery and mystique of the series. Like, the first movie is so far removed from Halloween 6, they don't even feel like they're the same franchise. This is without a doubt one of the worst sequels to a slasher movie ever. This movie genuinely kind of makes me mad. I really never even want to watch it. Like, it is funny bad, but it's also depressing bad because you remember how great this series was when it was just one movie. And look at the disgusting bloated monster they turned it into. Halloween 6 is awful. It deserves way, way, way more hate than Halloween 5. Like I said, Halloween 5 is an objectively bad movie, but it's enjoyable. I get no enjoyment watching Halloween 6. Halloween H2O, weirdly enough, I believe, was the first Halloween movie I heard about. When I was a little kid, I knew about Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees and Leprechaun and Chucky and all them, but I actually didn't know about Michael Myers until I got older. I knew about the actor Mike Myers before I knew about Michael Myers, so it was very confusing when people started talking about how scary Michael Myers was, and I'm thinking, Austin Powers? But no, they meant the famous killer Michael Myers. And it was a huge deal when H2O came out. It was 20 years later. I remember being really confused too. I heard a rumor that all the deaths in the movie involved water, and I actually thought that was true until years later. I was expecting the movie to be water themed. But I mean, it's called H2O because 20 years later, but it is kind of weird. Like, what does water have to do with this movie? So why do you call it H2O? It's just such a bad name. Honestly, I don't have that many thoughts on this movie. It's honestly one of the more forgettable ones, and this was the first time they retconned the series. Shit got so dumb by Halloween 6. They were like, there is no way in hell we can keep people watching these movies if we continue this horrible, mutilated storyline that we have going. So they did the smart thing, and they were like, none of that happened. But unfortunately, that means Halloween 4 didn't happen, and I love Halloween 4. But, I mean, they killed off Jamie Lee Curtis's character off-screen before Halloween 4, so maybe that's not so bad. It's not like the movie's going anywhere. It's fiction. I can still watch it. But it is kind of weird. Halloween 2, I don't think is good enough to keep. You might as well just say nothing but Halloween 1 happened. To be honest, I kind of always hate retconning stuff. People do that a lot now. When they did that in this film, that was kind of revolutionary, to take a giant, well-known IP and just say a bunch of the sequels didn't happen. But these days they do that so much with Terminator, and even with Jurassic World, they say that, at least when they were promoting Jurassic World, they said that only Jurassic Park happened, that part 2 and 3 didn't happen, which is fine because those movies were awful and the original one was a masterpiece. But it's also like, okay, if you're gonna do that, you gotta make something that is at least on par with that original masterpiece, and that's never gonna happen. Like, Jurassic Park did everything it needed to do in 1993. So Jurassic World served no purpose, and when it came out and I thought it was the worst Jurassic Park movie I had ever seen, even worse than the 2 sequels, I couldn't understand why they would even do that. And there's even hints that they didn't do that. So I don't even know if they are retconned, but they advertised it that way. But Jurassic Park is another discussion for another time, maybe. Halloween H2O was kind of revolutionary when it did that, because that wasn't a common practice at the time. That's the easy way to go about writing movies, and I'm honestly not a big fan, because while yes, most series will get really awful the more they go on, I do kind of feel like it's really sloppy to start picking and choosing what happened and what didn't happen. It's like, you're just selecting the parts you like and being like, oh, that's canon, but that's not canon, but this little thing is canon. It just seems like you're making a Frankenstein monster of a film series. And it just makes it really confusing for newcomers to get into the franchise. It's just such a mess. So I'm really not a fan of that. But Halloween H2O, it seemed like it wasn't a terrible idea because that Thorn trilogy just got so weird that you really, really needed to get rid of Halloween 6. H2O is a very unmemorable movie for the most part, though. It just feels like a post-Scream slasher movie, just a late 90s kind of era slasher film that was riding that new wave. It doesn't really have much of a unique identity. It doesn't have the grainy, gritty look of the original. It doesn't have that 80s Halloween feel. I don't know what it was about horror movies in the 80s, but they really captured this kind of special Halloween feeling that the 90s just didn't have. Everything was like a little too clean and streamlined. Everyone just looked like they just came off of the set of Friends in the 90s. Like, it just didn't feel like a Halloween movie. It felt like I Know What You Did Last Summer or Scream or something with Michael Myers and Laurie Strode in it. It was a good return to form. It did what it had to do. It has a great revenge scene where Laurie Strode finally gets her revenge on Michael Myers. It's the highlight of the movie. Everything that happens prior to that is forgettable. And she finally kicks his ass, kills him, makes sure he is completely dead. And it's satisfying, it does what it has to do, but I just feel like it's an extremely unmemorable movie. To be honest, I really don't have that much to say about it. I don't remember that much. I've actually seen it multiple times, and I don't ever remember that much about the movie outside of the final act. It was followed up by Halloween Resurrection, which I'm just going to squeeze in here because I don't have that much to say about it. Halloween Resurrection is a joke. It is like someone parodying the Halloween franchise, bordering on the line of scary movie. Only it's actually funny, whereas Scary Movie isn't. Halloween Resurrection is funny in all the wrong ways, though. It's not at all a good movie. It's terribly made, it's terribly acted, it's terribly written, and it's just a mockery. Like Busta Rhymes beating the crap out of Michael Myers with martial arts and spewing all these weird little one-liners you'd expect like Arnold Schwarzenegger to say.
Trick or treat, motherfucker. Trick or treat, motherfucker.
Who the hell came up with that? Oh, they also kill off Laurie Strode in like the first 10 minutes of the movie, so there goes her triumphant return that she just had like a year or two prior. It's so disrespectful. Like, the whole point of H2O was to undo all the silly, ridiculous crap that ruined the franchise, bring Laurie Strode back to actually make it feel like a proper Halloween movie again, because we can't have Donald Pleasance anymore. And this one just throws all that out the window. Literally throws Jamie Lee Curtis out the window. She's dead. And it just becomes ridiculous. It becomes just as ridiculous as the movies we're getting in the late 80s and the 90s. It's a horrible movie. It's so bad. It doesn't even feel like a proper Halloween movie. It just feels like some joke fan film. It's also trying to cash in on the recent success of Blair Witch Project and having found footage, live camera kind of crap going on. It is so awful. It is probably objectively the worst Halloween movie, but I think the fact that it's so misguided and hilariously bad makes it a little more watchable, honestly, than Halloween 6. I'm not going to talk about the Rob Zombie films because, I mean, A, they're a reboot. They're not even the same franchise. He's just retelling the story from the ground up and reimagining it in his own way. B, I'm not a huge fan of Rob Zombie's style. I'm not really a big fan of his movies. And C, I've never seen them, actually. I've never had any interest in seeing the remakes of Halloween. It's strange because I love Halloween. It's such an important movie to me and an important series, even though it's a rocky relationship. But I've just never had any interest in seeing what Rob Zombie did with the series. Anything I've heard, I don't like. Anything I've seen from it, I don't like. It's just like any movie Rob Zombie's made. No subtlety, just try to be as gross and vile and disgusting and disturbing as possible. Angry, just kind of glorifying killers, and somehow he always works in something about necrophilia and just all this just gross stuff. You just want to take a shower when you're done watching it. I don't like Rob Zombie's films. Nothing against the guy. I'm sure if we hung out and got a burger together, he'd be a cool dude. He clearly has a love for classic horror films. He references them all the time in his music, in his music videos, in his stage show, and even the name of his band, White Zombie. Like, I'm sure I'd have a lot to talk about with the guy, but I just hate his movies. I don't like them. So I won't be talking about the Rob Zombie ones. We finally have Halloween 2018, the third movie just called Halloween in the franchise. At this point, I was a little annoyed going into it, to be honest, because they're like, oh, we're retconning everything but Halloween 1. So this movie series has been completely shifted in direction and tried to become an anthology series. Then they tried to retcon the series. Then they tried to reboot the series. And then they tried to retcon the series again. So this movie series has basically tried to re-identify itself like 4 times. And to be honest, every time they do it, I don't think it works out that good. The anthology direction was the best reinvention they ever attempted, but nobody liked it because there was no Michael Myers. And I mean, Halloween 3 is an acquired taste. But I do remember having fun. I actually smuggled some Halloween candy into the movie theater and went and watched this in 2018, and it was fun to see a Halloween movie on the big screen. To be honest, this was my first time seeing one in a theater. When they were coming out when I was in junior high or high school, like when Resurrection came out, I wasn't into the franchise yet, so I didn't go and see those in theaters. This was my first time seeing a Halloween movie on the big screen, and it was exciting. Watching that intro where it plays the classic song, I was getting pumped. I definitely like the way the pumpkin's like rotted and then it comes back to life, like the series is finally coming back after years of being gone. Here it is again. And it was exciting seeing, you know, one of my favorite franchises come back to life. And it's not a terrible movie. It's honestly a pretty decent movie. It's a good attempt, but again, I don't think it really needs to happen. I don't think it's good enough to warrant the retcon. You're retconning like 40 years of movies almost, like 35 years of movies for this film, saying that this movie's too good for that 35 years of film. And then it's just average as hell. It's like not as bad as Jurassic World, but it's like if you're gonna retcon stuff, you gotta make something worthy of the retcon. And it's just another average Halloween movie, honestly. I do feel like they made Jamie Lee Curtis's character, Laurie Strode, while she is cool and you do root for her, she is a badass in the movie, they did make her really one note. And I know that was kind of the direction they wanted to go, and like she's obsessed with killing Michael Myers, but she was a bit too one note. Whereas other tough horror action stars like her, like Sigourney Weaver as Ripley and Sarah Connor, they're believable as people. Yes, Sarah Connor is very one note, but she's still human. Jamie Lee Curtis's Laurie Strode in this film, I didn't feel like she was very human. She just felt like a representation of angry revenge. They also have a daughter in there, and of course she's not Jamie Lloyd, which is kind of disappointing because, I mean, Danielle Harris doesn't get a lot of work. I mean, she makes out going to Monster Mania Con and all these cons, and I'd love to get a picture with her. So yeah, she's got a legacy, but it would be nice to see her come back. If you're gonna have Laurie Strode have a kid, even if you don't want to keep Halloween 4 as canon, you can at least make the daughter still played by Danielle Harris as like a cool reference. But the movie is kind of comical. It's kind of like silly and over the top. It has more like Friday the 13th style deaths. It's kind of like Halloween 2 in that it's just like, look at how shocking we can make the deaths. There's like really gory, really over the top deaths in here. And they all seem like they're played for laughs. There is a lot of comedy. It's even directed by a comedy director. There's some funny moments, like I remember the little kid who's being babysat. He's particularly funny, even though he's not a main character. But it has that kind of weird new style of cinema that people do. That as of the 2010s, Marvel blew up and everyone acknowledged that Marvel has a lot of jokes in their movies. But the thing is, in Marvel's movies, they're organic, they feel right, like they feel like real people who are just having banter and they just happen to say funny things. You know, like real people do. But everyone's convinced now that like you just have to insert a ton of humor into every movie to make it successful. That's just become a new thing. Everyone tries to do that. If it's like an action-packed movie or a thrilling movie, you have to just constantly hit the brakes and try to be funny. And so many movies have failed trying to do that, like the Dark Universe Mummy and Justice League, where like they clearly wrote a movie that wasn't funny and then just inserted crappy jokes all over the place, thinking, well, Marvel's successful doing that, so we'll be as successful as Marvel. But I don't know, Halloween movies usually could be funnier just in the sense that teenagers are just being teenagers, and sometimes just by what crazy kind of shitheads they are, it's funny. Or like you just meet a character who's just whacked out. It's not like a character who's just putting on a comedy act and performing jokes. That's one of the main things I thought ruined It Chapter 2 is in It Chapter 1, the comedy felt organic. It felt like little boys hanging out and just roasting each other, just throwing out insults, your mama jokes and everything like little boys do. Whereas in the second one, it just felt like anytime there was comedy, the movie just stopped and suddenly a stand-up act started going on. There was even that weird moment with Angel of the Morning. It's so bizarre. That movie was such a disappointment. That's for another time. But Chapter 1 was awesome. But that's something I thought was a problem with this movie. Is it just felt like a product of its time. Like people are going to look back in 10, 15, 20 years at the 2010s and be like, oh, that was the time where movies tried to insert a bunch of bad comedy and kind of meme culture comedy into everything. And anytime something was serious, the characters just whispered and stared blankly forward. All these tropes that all these movies do, and these big TV shows that everyone loves, these big dramatic shows, these like streaming shows where they take themselves so seriously and everyone's just so over the top serious all the time and they're always whispering. Like everyone whispers. Anytime somebody's serious in a movie now, people just whisper. And I think people are going to look back at these tropes years from now and laugh at them. Be like, oh, wow, that was such a product of the time. That was like everyone was doing that weird stuff for some reason. And that's what Halloween 2018 feels like. It feels like a 2010s movie. It feels like we're going to look back at it in the future and just be like, wow, this is such a 2010s movie. And they try to really put an emphasis on the fact that Michael Myers is a normal guy this time around, that he's like not supernatural. But then they make him ridiculously strong. Like he bursts someone's head with his foot like it's a tomato. It's just really weird how the rules just keep changing in this movie. I did feel a little bit, although I've never seen them, I felt a bit of Rob Zombie Michael Myers in the Michael Myers portrayal here. There are scenes where he straight up just feels like classic Michael Myers, but then there's other ones like in the bathroom in the gas station that just felt a little more Rob Zombie to me. Stuff like him smashing the head with his foot, that's very Rob Zombie. Overall, I don't think it really did anything that special. It tried to do the same kind of triumphant, Laurie Strode finally gets her revenge storyline that we already got the satisfaction of seeing in H2O. This one's probably done better, but we already got it in H2O, so it's kind of like, this is 20 years after the 20-year celebration where we did this. It's like, are we just gonna do this every 20 years? I don't really think this movie needed to exist. When I was done seeing it, I was pleased. I was like, oh, that was good. That was a damn good entry in the series. But as time has gone by, I just kind of felt more and more like it was kind of a generic slasher film for its time. I don't really think it's any better than any of the other Halloween series. So all in all, let's rank the series. Starting at the very bottom of the barrel worst is Halloween 6. Halloween 6 is terrible. I would put producer's cut below theatrical cut if you want to put both of them on there. So worst, bottom of the barrel is producer's cut, Halloween 6. Slightly above that is Halloween 6 theatrical cut. Slightly above that is Halloween Resurrection. That movie is awful, but I feel like the fact that it's just so hilariously awful makes it a little better than Halloween 6. I would rather watch Halloween Resurrection than 6. Then we get to an area where there's a close tie. I can't really decide. You have H2O, 2018, Halloween 2, and Halloween 5. They're all very close. But I'm going to be honest, even though Halloween H2O was the triumphant return to form, 2018 was another attempt at the triumphant return to form, and Halloween 2 was the first of the sequels and didn't get as crazy and bad as some of the later ones. I'm not going to lie, I'd rather watch Halloween 5 than any of those movies. If someone suggested those 4 movies and I had to pick one, I'd probably pick Halloween 5. I'd be like, you know what, that's the most fun I'm going to have, so let's watch Halloween 5. So I would say at the bottom, unfortunately, is probably H2O. While I did say that H2O was more satisfying in 2018, all around I think 2018 is a more memorable movie than H2O. So I would say after H2O, above that is Halloween 2018. Above that is Halloween 2, and then I know some people are going to be mad if anybody even watches this, but I think Halloween 5 is the best of those 4 movies, and then I'd put Halloween 5. After that, I would say Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. I love that movie for what it is. It's campy, it's charming as hell, and it's just a breath of fresh air in that series that got so stale. Then number 2, I would say, is Halloween 4, because I just have a lot of fun watching that one, and I do think it is the best made film after the original. And then way, way, way above the rest of them at number 1, no comparison, is Halloween 1, the original from the 70s. There's no touching that movie. The other ones aren't even on the same wavelength. As I've said, it's strange because I feel like the sequels ruin the first one's legacy so much. The first one would be so much better if it was just a standalone movie. But at the same time, I do have so much fun watching the stupid sequels that I can't say I want to live in a world without them. So that's my ranking of the Halloween films. So although these movies have been reviewed a million times online, I hope you appreciated my personal look at these films and my retrospective on the entire series. And most of all, I hope you have a very, very happy Halloween. Do all the liking and subscribing and the sharing and the bell stuff.